ladies and gentlemen, gather around the campfire while we tell a tale that is so enriched in this country's history that it will make you be thinking, maybe this legend is true, or maybe it's just a legend itself. But gather around while we tell you a tale of a guy that sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. And what happened next to him is something miraculous. Thank you for joining us. Be sure, if you like this video, hit the red subscribe button down below, the thumbs up, notification bell to always on, and let's get back into the video. The legend goes in the delta of the Mississippi River Valley. They say if an aspiring bluesman waited by the side of a deserted country crossroad in the dark of a moonlit night, then Satan himself would come and tune the musician's guitar, sealing a pact with the bluesman and the devil himself. But the devil guaranteed a life of money and fame and women, and all the bluesman had to do was sell his soul to the devil. One of the most notorious people that on record that this has been shown is that Robert Johnson, the bluesman of the South, waited by the crossroad and had his guitar fine-tuned to the devil himself. And let's go throughout what this whole legend is all about, because here at the Supernatural Files we go more in depth into the legends and myths that make up the whole world as a whole, but not only the world but the stories that were told. So let's venture back into the early 1900s for this episode. Ooh, now that we're in the early 1900s for the setting of this video, let's get into what this legend is all about. According to legend, a young man living on a plantation in rural Mississippi, Robert Johnson, had a tremendous desire to be one of the most famous and most recognized blues musicians of his time. One legend often told was that Johnson was suggested to take his guitar to the crossroad near the Dockery plantation at midnight. There were claims for at least a dozen other sites as the location of the crossroads. There he was met by a large black man who was the devil himself, who took the guitar and tuned it for Robert Johnson. The devil played a few songs and then retuned the guitar, giving it back to Robert Johnson. And thus him doing this gave Robert Johnson the mastery of playing the guitar. The story of a deal with the devil at the crossroads mirrors the legend of Faust. In exchange for his soul, Johnson was able to write and create the blues music that he has been so famous and synonymous for. This is not the first time that this legend has come across in folk stories and legends. The legend was developed over time and has been chronicled by Geraldine Wardlow, Edward Kamara, and Elijah Wald, who sees this legend as largely dating from Johnson's rediscovery by white fans more than 2 decades after his death. Son House was once told the story of Pete Welding as an explanation of Johnson's astonishing rapid mastery of the guitar. Welding reported it as a serious belief in a widely read article in the Downbeat in 1966. Other interviewers failed to elicit any confirmation from House, and there were fully 2 years between House's observation of Johnson as a novice and then a master. Further details were emerged from the imaginative retellings by Grill Marcus and Robert Palmer. Most significantly, the detail was added that Johnson received his gift from a large black man at a crossroads. There is large dispute to how and when the crossroad detail was attached to the Robert Johnson story. all the published evidence, including a full chapter on the subject in the biography, Crossroads by Tom Graves, suggests an origin of the story of the blues musician Tommy Johnson. The story was collected from his musical associate Ishmael Bracey and his brother Liddell's in the 1960s. One version of Liddell Johnson's account was in David Evans' 1971 biography of Tommy Johnson and was repeated in print in 1982 alongside House's story in the widely read title of The Searching for Robert Johnson by Peter Gurek. In another version, Liddell placed the meeting not at a crossroads but at a graveyard instead. This resembles the story told to Steve Levere that Ike Zimmerman of Hazelhurst, Mississippi learned to play the guitar at midnight while sitting gravestone tombstones. Zimmerman is believed to have influenced the playing of the young Robert Johnson. Recent research by the blues scholar Bruce Comforth in Living Blues magazine makes the story clearer. Johnson and Ike Zimmerman did practice in a graveyard at night because it was quiet and they wouldn't disturb anyone. But it was not the Hazelhurst Cemetery that everyone has been told. Zimmerman was not from Hazelhurst, but he was from nearby Beauregard, and he did not practice in one graveyard, but several in the area. Johnson spent a year living with and learning from Zimmerman, who ultimately accompanied Johnson back to the Delta to look after him. Now let's get into the controversy and surrounding this whole Robert Johnson, because he would go and practice in these little places that at first he was not good. He would follow famous musicians around that town, and they said he was not even that good for a novice. And for him to just leave up and go somewhere and come back and seem to be a master in just 2 years, where it took most of these people a lot longer to become a master of the guitar. It was like something was possessed in him, and he came back. And there are not a lot of pictures known of that era. There are mainly 2 pictures from Robert Johnson's life, but the whole enigma of this situation is no one knew who Robert Johnson was when he was alive. Everyone knew about him after he was dead because of his songs of Made a Deal with the Devil and Hellhounds on My Trail. Were these songs literally about his life and how he made a deal and how these hellhounds of the devil were coming to get him? We don't know. Let's look into his death to find out more. Johnson died on August 16th, 1938. So he wasn't that old when he died. He was only the age 27 when he died. So, like they say, great musicians die at a young age. Near Greenwood, Mississippi, an unknown cause. His death was not reported publicly. He merely disappeared from the public record. And it was not until 30 years later when Gail Wardlow, a Mississippi-based musicologist, researching Johnson's life, found his death certificate, which listed only the date and location with no official cause of death. No formal autopsy was done. Instead, a pro forma examination was done to file the death certificate, and no immediate death of cause was determined. It is likely he had congenital syphilis, and it was suspected later by medical professionals that it may have contributed to a factor of his death. However, 30 years of local legend and oral tradition had, like the rest of his story, built a legend which has filled the gaps in the Gant historical record. Several different accounts have described the preceding his death. Johnson had been playing for a few weeks at a country dance in a town about 15 miles from Greenwood. According to one theory, Johnson was murdered by the jealous husband of a woman with whom he had flirted. An account by the musician Sonny Boy Williamson. Johnson had been flirting with a married woman at a dance, and she gave him a bottle of whiskey, poisoned by her husband. When Johnson took the bottle, Williamson knocked it out of his hand, admonishing him never to drink that he had from a bottle that he had never seen been properly opened. Johnson replied, "Don't ever knock this out of my hand." Soon after, he was offered another poisoning bottle and accepted it. Johnson is reported to have began feeling ill that evening and had to be held back to his room in the early morning hours. Over the next 3 days, his condition steadily worsened. Witnesses reported that he had died in a convulsive state of severe pain. The musicologist, Robert McCormick, claimed to have tracked down the man who murdered Johnson and to have obtained a confession from him in a personal interview. But he declined to name the person or to put out the confession. It has come to think, maybe he didn't track down the person. Maybe he just made that up to make his story and to make him look good. While strychnine has been suggested that that was the poison that killed Robert Johnson, at least one scholar has disputed that notion. Tom Graves, in his book titled Crossroads, The Life and Afterlife of Blues Legend Robert Johnson, relies on expert testimonies from toxicologists to argue that strychnine has such a distinctive odor and taste that it cannot be disguised, even in strong liquor. Graves also claims that a significant amount would have been consumed in one sitting to be fatal, and the death from the poison would occur in hours, not days. There have been many interpretations of Robert Johnson's rise to fame, from the going on the crossroads to playing in graveyards, but most of us know that that's just legend because we weren't there, we can't go. So let's dive into the different type of interpretations, because we all know that the devil we know is white, but that is not the only devil in history. So let's go into the interpretations. Some scholars have argued that the devil in these songs may have not been referred to the Christian figure of Satan, but also to the trickster god of African lore. Master Legba himself is associated with the crossroads. Folklorist historian Harry Haidt wrote that during his research in the South from 1935 to 1939, when African Americans born in the 19th or early 20th century said they or anyone else had sold their soul to the devil at the crossroads, they had a different meaning in mind. Hyatt claimed was evidence indicating African religious retentions surrounding Legba and the making of a deal, not selling the soul, and the same as in the Vastian tradition cited by Graves, with the so-called devil of the crossroads. The blues and the blues singer has really special power over women, especially. It is said that the blues singer could possess women and have any woman they wanted. And so when Robert Johnson came back, having left his community as an apparently mediocre musician with a clear genius in his guitar, style, and lyrics, people said he must have sold his soul to the devil. And that fits. And with this old African association with the crossroads, where you find wisdom, you go down to crossroads to learn. And in this case, to learn in a Vastician pact with the devil. You sell your soul to become the greatest blues musician in history. The musicologist Alan Lomax dismissed the myth, and he says, in fact, every blues fiddler, banjo picker, harp blower, piano strummer, and guitar framer was in the opinion of both himself and his peers a child of the devil, a consequence of the black view of the European dance, embraced as sinful in the extreme. No one can argue that Robert Johnson, there's no way he could have mastered the guitar like he did in such a short time. Was it by nefarious means? Did he go sell his soul at the crossroads to Papa Legba, or the Christian demon known as Satan himself? Or was a deal made with the red-eyed demon where he sold his soul for so many years, and after that the hellhounds would be coming for him? And that his songs are basically, if you look at it, it's all about his life, from he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads to the hellhounds are on my trail. No one can argue that Robert Johnson was not the best blues musician of his time, whether it be by just practicing by himself or nefarious means. No one can ever argue that Robert Johnson did not make his mark on history, and he did not leave behind bad legacy. He left behind a legacy of more questions than answers. Maybe one day we will have those answers, maybe one day we won't. But for now, we say, Robert Johnson, we are learning from you, and we will not make crossroad deals with Papa Legba or red-eyed demons. Thank you all for joining me. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, thumbs up, click the notification bell to always on, and leave a comment down below. And let's get back into let's go back to the present. And I'll see you guys on the next one of the Supernatural Files. See ya.